let's go ahead and get started. So this is a super personal talk for me, and it's one that I came up with after seeing this tweet. I'll go ahead and read it for folks if you're watching on mobile. I recently found out people living with ADHD do not miss people. For them, it is out of sight, out of mind. If you're not physically there, you don't exist. If this has really messed up a lot of relationships. And man, this hit me like a truck when I heard it. It was one of those things that like I read it and immediately kind of scoffed at it. And then like a couple of nights later, 3 o'clock in the morning, it wakes me up and I'm like, oh my God, do I have friends who I know who care about me that like I haven't talked to and that I've effectively forgotten about? Um, and it was at a particularly, I think, relevant point for me because I had gone through, like a lot of folks have over the last couple of years, a round of layoffs that had happened at the end of 2023. And it was a new experience for me. It was something that had never happened to me before. And I found that I had a lot of unexpected embarrassment about it. And the way that that came up was that I just kind of realized that I had pulled back. And a lot of the people that I talked to on a day-to-day basis that were kind of part of not just my work, coworkers and peers, but were also part of my social circle, my day-to-day social circle. Suddenly, I had gone months without talking to some of them. And I continue to kind of think about this, and maybe this is true, but also no, right? Like this isn't exactly the truth. What I think is more accurate for a lot of folks, not just folks with ADHD, is that our memories are contextual, and if we are not intentional about how we preserve our relationships, build onto our relationships, record our relationships, and find ways to fill in the gaps where we may personally have gaps in ability to show up for our friends, those relationships can atrophy. And so I decided, you can either get scared or you can get ahead, right? And so I started to get really strategic. Oh boy, here I go over engineering again. I wanted to take the same sort of intentional approach to my relationships that I took to the strategy recommendations that I would make in my day-to-day work, talking with organizations about assessing their current state, preparing for the changes that they want to make, and implementing them. So that is the same breakdown that you're going to see as we go through today. We're going to take a look at why we need to protect our relationships, how they help us fend off burnout. We're going to look at what the ingredients of successful relationships are in the analogy of working through a security framework. If we're evaluating our environment, you need to know what your top assets and your top risks are if you're going to build a plan to address them, right? And then we're going to actually have some really specific, actionable to-do items that you can take into your own life to help make sure that you are able to not just maintain and strengthen those relationships that you have, but also build in organic opportunities to establish and form new ones, which I think is especially important, having so many of our daily cycles get disrupted in 2020 and thereafter, right? So, why do we need to protect our relationships? Burnout is a good reason, right? I think that good friendship is obviously its own reward. It's part of the fabric of what makes life enjoyable and worth living. It is how we share the things that are important with us. It is how we share memories that, really are whole only when we are discussing them with the people that we went through them with. But in terms of like measurable mental health benefits, our relationships have a big impact on burnout. And what is burnout? I included here a screen cap from, and in the resources you will get a link to a self-assessment, the Oldenburg Burnout Inventory. It's very short. It's 16 questions. And those 16 questions are split between two constant factors that are going to be used for establishing burnout, right? It is disengagement, and exhaustion. And these questions are going to help us determine how much burnout we are experiencing or how at risk we are of burnout. What does burnout do to us? Well, job demands, including workload and time pressure, gets linked to increased burnout. That burnout was associated with higher turnover intentions and actual turnover. Adverse psychosocial working conditions characterized by job strain are associated with an increased risk of depressive symptoms among employees. So we talk about our work-life balance, and we like to think of those as kind of two discrete domains that we are trying to maintain a healthy balance between. But the reality is, both of these influence each other, right? If our work is overwhelming, it has an impact on our home life and our relationships there. If we are struggling to maintain those relationships and we aren't finding the opportunities to restore, to recharge when we are at home, eventually that's going to have an impact on our work. And in the context of security, it contributes to a higher likelihood of error. So let's take a quick look for a moment at how this affects folks in infosec specifically, because we know information security is a very high stress industry. It is one that has very high stakes. The work that you are doing is very important. And if an error happens, it has potentially disastrous ramifications. Also, it is incredibly complex. We are constantly dealing and triaging multiple things at once. Our environments are never static, they're always changing. And there are so many decisions to make in the day to day that all of these contribute to those burnout factors. It begins to feel overwhelming. That feeling of being overwhelmed can lead to feelings of cynicism or resentment, which can have an impact on our work. All of this means our relationships are less secure, our mental health is less secure, and the organizations that we protect end up being less secure. And this is something that we know is a topic of conversation that we need to talk about, right? We have to talk about the state of security. Only 47% of cybersecurity professionals in one study said their mental health status is high. I'll say that again. Less than half of people working in security would rate their mental health as high. That's not great. That's not sustainable either, right? That's not something that we can do indefinitely. So we know what the risk is. If we don't do something to preserve our mental health, to give us those opportunities to restore, to recharge, we accrue debt towards burnout. It's like our personal technical debt, right? So that's half of it. And I always try and put the scary stuff up front because I like to focus on solutions. So let's start talking about what mitigates burnout. Honestly, one of the biggest factors is our relationships. And this is something that is shown in many different branches of research. And links to the studies that these excerpts and quotes are coming from also is going to be in that follow-up email. But the long and the short of it is our friendships, our relationships, they help us maintain our well-being and buffer stress. The stronger and closer our relationships are, the better equipped we are to buffer stressful situations and be able to maintain and persevere through them without it having negative, detrimental effects on our mental health. Fortunately, in InfoSec, we never have to deal with high levels of stress, right? Also, something that I thought was interesting here was this study in your 20s, it's quantity. In your 30s, it's quality that found, kind of like the title suggests, in our youth, we have a greater number of more casual friendships. We're going to talk a little bit about the factors that contribute to that. And as we get older, our friend circles start to narrow. Also, our relationships oftentimes start to shift to have a heavier balance on family as we start our own. But those relationships having a longer shared history and a closer connection, they are closer. So it is an evolution of how we engage in relationships moving through our life that I think can be illustrative of both how we form those relationships and what can affect them. This was taking a look at medical students. Again, this is a environment of very high stakes, very rapid decision making. And, this is something that accumulates over time, very long hours, unpredictable. That study suggested that the medical students' high levels of resilience were associated with taking more self-care actions that included stress management, spiritual growth, and interpersonal relations, right? Their friendships, their relationships, the people that they can confide in. So, all of that is to say, I put a bunch of numbers together and looked for some studies to tell you friends are good, actually. Um, and I'm sure that Miranda Priestley would tell you that is groundbreaking, right? I don't need to convince you that friends are a good thing. I do think that it's helpful to look at the measurable impacts that it can have on our life. And I find that study of the shift from quantity to quality really interesting too. So let's take a look at some of those risk factors. What factors represent risk in our relationships? Well, relationships come naturally to us early in life. We have a lot of time and proximity around other people. We have a lot of shared factors, shared experiences, connections with those people that we interact with and see regularly that help nurture and foster friendship. We have the same schedules, right? When you're in school, at least in earlier education, you're often going class to class with the same group of people. We have the same interests as we are growing up and going through extracurriculars. We are going to kind of naturally end up spending a decent amount of time around other people who love and engage in the same things that we do. And we go through shared challenges. One of the experiences that can lead to the closest friendships is kind of surviving hard situations and weathering them together. I think because in those situations, we depend all the more on those people that are going through the same thing to kind of, hold each other up, to share that load. So, what happens as we start to get older? Well, we start to move. We go to college, we move for our careers, we meet people, we move to help take care of our parents. And oftentimes, those early social circles that we have in our youth and our teens and our 20s, part of what starts to leach that away and shrink that circle is geographic. Speaking of reasons to move, our careers, right? Oftentimes, the further that we get into our careers, the more consuming they are, and the more likely they are to kind of creep into some of that traditional social time. If you're juggling multiple part-time gigs or you're working in your passion, you're strongly incentivized to prioritize those activities that keep a roof over your head and food on your plate, and everything else, it's easy to get prioritized after that. Also, the types of relationships that we prioritize change. We start to build families, we form intimate partnerships, we have children, we take care of those elder family members, right? And there's always external world factors that can have an impact. I think that a lot of the conversations that we have seen really crop up just in the last few years around loneliness have a lot to do with how disrupted our day-to-day schedules and routine connections were as a result of COVID and the kind of changes, lasting changes that we see as people start to go back to meeting in person. And, there's always other factors too. Like if you find a really good video game that you're excited about, you might kind of drop off the face of the planet for a little while. That's all right. Okay, so let's talk about what kinds of relationships we are talking about here. And I found this is not a direct definition adoption, more of an analogy, but I thought it was helpful to frame this around the six types of love that were defined by the ancient Greeks. If you're not aware, oftentimes you'll hear conversations about, the vocabulary that languages are more varied and nuanced for, talks about what that culture prized or prioritized. And in ancient Greece, rather than talking about love as a sort of all around emotion that maybe we qualify with an adjective like platonic or romantic, they had different words to describe the different types of love. And I found these really useful to talk about the many kinds of relationships that we build in our life, all of which are important and feed kind of different parts of us. So you have storge, family love. These are the people that we are most deeply connected with, who we share the most history and ritual with, who we most depend on and most depend on us. Our children, our partners, our parents can all be family, but also so can chosen family, right? We also oftentimes will have members of our family that we are related to by blood, and we will have people who we consider beyond friendship as family due to the forged bond that we have with them. I think that a good kind of rule of thumb to follow, if you still know their number by heart in 2025, it's a pretty good bet we're talking about family. Next, we have philia, or deep friendship. And this can be a little blurry, the exact line between our family love relationships and our deep friendship relationships. And sometimes people can move to either side of it as we go through life, right? Relationships, just like people, aren't static. They change and evolve as we do. But this is typically defined by deep trust. It's built on demonstrated camaraderie, a history of having shown up for each other. And these are the people who you trust to tell you straight. There's conversations that you may have with your best friend that you would never be able to have with your parents or with your children. In some ways, that relationship can be too close, right? But you still need that confidant with a long history who can give you, who you trust to give you advice, even if it's painful, even if it's not what you want to hear. You know that they're going to be honest with you and they're speaking towards your best interest. We have pragma, or long-standing love. And this I think of as those relationships that just form over time. And I think that most of us can probably think of some work relationships that this would apply to. It could also be school relationships where you have seen each other grow and change. You may not have even started out with that relationship being friendly. I can think of a couple of examples of people who I worked with and initially had a personality clash with. And then over time, as I got to know them and I got to understand them and empathize with them, better understand where they're coming from, that relationship evolved. One person who I'm thinking of particularly, to more of like a sibling relationship where it's like, we can fight. We're probably not ever going to fully agree on everything, but we've gone through that history together. We've shared those experiences together. And there is a bond that is forged there. This can be especially helpful in those contexts where those relationships are formed. If you've ever had a work best friend or a work spouse, you know that sometimes, just like you need to have those conversations with your best friend that you can't have with your family, sometimes you need to have those conversations about work or about school or about, the community organizations that you involve yourself in. That somebody who doesn't have all of that, not just history with you, but history of the context that you're talking about, isn't going to be able to get on with. And then we have ludus, or playful love. And this I think of as our relationships formed through shared passion. These are through our shared love or practice of a shared passion. So if you've got a standing sports bar that you go to always watch the game with the same group of people, if you've got a gaming group, either, an online multiplayer or a tabletop game, you go to karaoke every week, if you have a book club, if you join discussion groups, all of these are places where everyone's there because of one thing that they are interested in, that they share a love over. And just how those creative or personal passions can, even though we put energy into them, they can be restorative in that we get more energy from them than we put into them. Those friendships, those relationships can be a source of fuel for that passion and help to recharge us as well. So our rule of thumb here is, you just got to find somebody who matches your geek, right? Then we have agape, love for everyone. And I think in the conversation here, this is a good opportunity to talk about the importance of our acquaintanceships. Alongside all of these more intimate or closer relationships that we have, there is the underlying noise of the regular familiar faces that we see as we move through the world. The delivery person, the barista that you see, the folks that share a commute ride with you. These are people who you may never even know their name, but you can imagine their face quickly. You've probably had some conversations. You may have a shared inside joke even. This is one of the biggest things that took a hit, I think, in the wake of COVID. And this, I think, is also alongside those long-standing work relationships. There's also those more casual work relationships, the folks that maybe you never work with directly, but you see each other at the water cooler. You see each other at team meetings. Maybe you get to have relationships that bridge a couple of these. You had a coworker who you saw at the office, but then you saw they were reading the same book or a book by your favorite author. Now there's an opportunity to make a deeper connection there. And finally, this is the one, please, if I mess up the pronunciation on this, I hope someone will correct me. But philautia, love of self, believing you are worthy of connection and love, setting boundaries and examining relationships that are unhealthy, whether they are restorative and mutually beneficial, or if this is something that you are pouring your energy into without getting a equal amount of buy-in from the other person. This all factors into having love for yourself, being willing and able to recognize what you need and put boundaries about that around that and advocate for that. This is going to be really key when we get to some of the practical measures that are about to come up here in a moment. And I want to make mention here, there's a really kind of common phrase. You've probably heard it, if you don't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else? And that's one of those things that, like, yeah, that can make sense when you hear it initially, but I'm not as much a fan of it. And I think that something that gets a little bit closer to the truth is sometimes we learn to love ourselves by seeing the reflection of ourselves in the people who love us. Sometimes when you aren't able to see your value or, what makes people want to be your friend, that feedback from the outside can give you the perspective that you need to start to internalize it. So I would say, even if there's an area of these types of love that you feel like you don't have an abundance of in your life right now, you can kind of start to, as you move through and interact with people, you can think about, where does this relate? All right, what helps to strengthen or to build new relationships? And I think the common threads from what we've seen in research and the types of relationships we've taken a look at here, it comes down to a matter of routine, shared experience, and intent. And I'm going to talk about what each of those mean right now. We're going to go into actual implementation. So we're going to talk about routine. And this is, again, I'm going to go back to the beginning of COVID a good deal. Our routines took a major hit. We went into lockdown and suddenly we weren't seeing those people day to day. We weren't having those acquaintanceships. Oftentimes, at the same time that we were having a harder time connecting with those closer folks in our life, we were just having an all-around dip in our ability to socialize. And this is important because in a lot of ways, making new relationships is a numbers game. If you never have the opportunity to meet new people, you're not going to be able to have the conversations with them that will lead to the connections that will lead to a relationship. So figuring out if there is routine, if there is time in your routines for opportunities to make those new connections, is going to be really important because even if we take all the best actions, even if we bring our best selves every day to every relationship, not every relationship is going to survive our entire lives. That's not the happiest news, but it is like a reality. And, same way that when we're assessing our environments, we need to be realistic about our risks. We need to accept that, moves happen, people's priorities change, people fall out of touch. And so there does need to, if we are going to continue to have a healthy social circle as we move into middle age and into our elder years, we need to continue to have those opportunities for new relationships. So pay attention. Who are you interacting with in your daily routine? It's really easy to get into this kind of bubble. You migrate between bubbles. There's the home bubble, the work bubble, the commute bubble. And especially when things get busy, it's really kind of easy to autopilot in those moments between them, where if you take the opportunity to try and be present, to take the time to get to know that barista's name, to ask, what are they studying? If you see that they've got a textbook, this is, again, going to help build those acquaintanceships that are the baseline that other relationships most often are going to start to grow from. It also helps us keep our social skills sharp so that, there's a great talk about doing creative work and how if you're doing creative work, you can't let inspiration be your only motivator. You need to find an external locus to motivate you so that when inspiration strikes, you are in practice and you have the skills to make the most of it. I think the same thing is true in many areas of our life, but definitely in relationships. The opportunity to make a new friendship isn't going to happen every day, but if you are keeping yourself sharp, if you're paying attention in conversations, if you're practicing being a good listener, when the opportunity presents itself, you're more likely to be successful in that at bat. This one may be hard advice for people, and really hear me out. You need to carve out time for yourself. I want you to look at your calendar. How much of your scheduled and remindered calendar right now is things that you have to do or owe other people versus things that you want to do or are doing for yourself? If you're really lopsided, or if you're like I have been for a long time, you might not have any standing, scheduled, time blocked socializing or self recovery time reserved. And that's a liability, right? You can't just bookmark an article on a new subject that you want to learn about. Everything can't live on a someday list because someday never comes unless you make a plan to get there. So don't just think about going back to read that article. Put it in your calendar. Set up time on the weekend that you're going to sit down and read it and make some notes on it. Treat it as seriously as you would a mandatory team meeting. I have a much easier time being accountable when I would disappoint somebody else than when I would let myself down. I think that the first step to making progress in that is recognizing that it takes time to do it. You need to set up time in your day for these things. Inertia works both ways. It's hard to get momentum starting in a new thing, but once you've established that routine, it also gets easier to maintain it. So get out of your comfort zone. Try maybe a community center dance class. You can do a weekly raid with a regular group online. These don't all have to be in-person relationships. Work with the schedule that you have. Connect with people in the ways that you're able to. Maybe it's a Thursday night D&D game. Maybe it's just having a standing appointment for Sunday dinner that no matter how crazy things get for the family through the week, every Sunday we're going to come together and have a home-cooked meal. And a little cheat, if you are still struggling to give yourself permission to take that time for yourself, a little hack is you can volunteer. And work on giving yourself some more grace because you deserve it. I'm not sure where you get to sign up to dress in like casual Indiana Jones cosplay and feed a tiger with a bottle. If you find out, I'd love to know. You can drop it in chat there. But not only does this give us that element of accountability to someone else, to wanting to show up and honor our commitment, but also we can get that restorative effect through helping somebody else. We can also find some of our value through helping someone else. Oftentimes, if you feel totally lost and you have no idea what to do, a really good first step is figure out how you can help somebody. Next step, shared experiences. You probably noticed that in many of those types of relationships, one of the defining characteristics of it is time. time spent together, time doing things together, experiences shared together, and then sharing the memory of those experiences is a lot of the meat of our relationships and of our friendships. And sharing is one thing, remembering what you've shared is a totally different ballgame. And this is one of the areas for myself that I really needed to spend a lot of time shoring up. Because going all the way back to that tweet that we saw at the beginning, it's not a matter of I would forget my friends. The problem is I would think of them. I would think about how I hadn't called them at 3 o'clock in the morning when I can't do anything about it. Um, if you just leave it to happenstance, oftentimes when you are reminded to do that reach out, it's not going to be the time that you are actually able to do that reach out. So, if you were to ask me what my favorite movies are right now in the moment, I'd probably freeze. Like, I'd have a hard time thinking of, wait, have I actually watched a movie before? That's not quite true. I did see Monkey Man again this weekend. That's an absolute banger, highly recommended. But get the idea of what I'm saying here, right? Like, you don't necessarily, in the moment, have the best recollection. So, building up routines, making a habit of recording those experiences so that you can come back to them later is really key. The way that I do this is I take pictures. I am slightly out of the age group redacted that is like kind of has that reflex of doing selfies or doing group pictures when you're doing things together. It's absolutely a habit that I really had to practice and learn. But it has become one of the most rewarding habits that I've built. And I can't recommend enough giving yourself ways to kind of passively surface those pictures up again. I've got probably 30,000 pictures in my camera roll dating back to 2010 or whenever I was able to start syncing it across devices. A lot of those the last time I saw them was through the screen when I took them. When I added a little widget on my home screen that would surface different photos from my photo rolls and favor people who got tagged more often throughout the day, it started to remind me of all kinds of incidental day-to-day moments. Not the big trip that we took together or when we went to go see a concert and those, kind of big ticket memories, but random Saturday going to catch up at our favorite diner, getting my favorite plate of skillet. I love a good skillet. And, looking at that picture, I remember that day. I remember the weather. I remember what we were talking about. And that gives me a reason to send a message to that person. Also, get all those candid moments, not just a group picture, but when you're in the midst of doing the thing. I am not the most, I don't like getting my picture taken. I recognize how ridiculous this is as I'm doing a video webinar for all of you. But I don't like getting my picture taken. The best pictures, the pictures that I have liked the most that I'm in, are candid moments where I'm not looking at the camera and I'm just existing and sharing that moment with people. So you can give that gift to your friends. You can also, again, give yourself more of that context. And all of us can think back to our time reading Proust and know that all of our senses play a factor in our memory. I think this is why sharing food in particular is such a great way to build relationships, to make connections, to build community. There's a reason why we talk about breaking bread with someone as a way to kind of make inroads at finding common ground. Um, I am strongly of the belief that two of the fastest hacks to build community are sharing food together and sharing music together. And if we're talking about memory in particular, looking at music is particularly illustrative. There's been a fair amount of research, particularly around Alzheimer's disease, showing that some of our most resilient memories are our musical tastes. In advanced Alzheimer's patients, some of the last core memories that they can reliably hang on to and that will help anchor them in a moment are the songs that they loved in their early adolescence. And that is the time of life where we are really starting to define ourselves and our own tastes and not mirroring the tastes of people around us or kind of absorbing the tastes of people in our life. And so those are oftentimes some of the memories that we hold on to the longest. So if you are trying to think of ways to hang on to those memories of time spent with friends, pictures are great. Also, sharing those kind of multi-sensory experiences and keeping those multi-sensory mementos are going to be really important. If you think of a song that you love, I bet that there is a concrete, specific memory that you can be transported to as soon as you hear the first few notes. Where were you in that moment? Who were you with in that moment? Is that person one of the people that is important in your life? There's a good chance that the answer to those questions is yes. And finally, if you are unsure how to reach out to somebody, if it's been a while and you're embarrassed, cookies are a great way to go. I have enjoyed this as a hack. Nobody is mad about getting home baked cookies, and you never need a reason. It doesn't have to be a birthday. You can just say, hey, I was thinking about you. I made some cookies. Can I stop by and drop them off? I also want to mention here part of the outcome of this process that I'm going through right now was involved making some painful outreaches to those people that I hadn't talked to in a long time. And there was a lot of fear and anxiety and doubt that I had in the lead up to doing that outreach because I was afraid they'd be mad. I would afraid that they wouldn't want to be friends anymore, right? And the truth is, your friends are friends with you because they like you. They want to see you do well. They want to hear from you. So even if it's been a while, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, they're going to be glad to hear from you. Which brings us to intent. All of this is great. Keeping a record is fantastic. If you don't have a plan in place and those memories only come up at 3 o'clock in the morning, or when you're in a meeting, or when you are in a long conversation and you wish that you were able to talk about it with somebody else, that's going to be kind of a hard stopping point. So for me, it was how do I build this into my day-to-day life? And I started by looking at CRMs. I have a background in sales, and when I was doing outreach calls, I would be having easily dozens to 50 or more concurrent conversations happening across your phone calls, emails, in the lead up to a purchase and the follow up to a purchase. And I felt better able to keep up to date on those conversations than any I ever had in my personal life because of the CRM. As I'm having a conversation, I'm making those notes. I've got the brief of, everything to remind me about the basics of previous conversations and connections with that customer. I know what they're interested in. I know what we talked about last time and what I should be bringing to the next conversation. I've got reminders set up that I don't have to think about it in the time between our last conversation and our next conversation. I can offload that mental load because I have it on my calendar. And I've tried and I've brainstormed different versions of like a personal CRM. There are commercial app versions of this. I know UpHabit is one that I've taken a look at myself in the past. And I've talked about this to friends who haven't done anything in sales or in a customer facing role before. And they kind of like gave me a look like, isn't that kind of transactional or cheapening your relationship with your friends to kind of treat them like a prospect or like a customer? And I don't think that that's actually true. I think that it is a demonstration of intent and commitment to showing up for that relationship, to recognize where you may have a natural gap and building a framework to support it so that you can be a better friend. I think that that is a valid and a worthy goal. Unfortunately, building new habits is hard. Using new apps is hard. It's easy to find another app that says it's going to do everything that you need, but if it's just getting thrown on the pile, it doesn't provide you with a lasting solution. You need to be strategic. You need to find things that integrate well with the fabric of your daily life. For me, that meant going back to what I use most, my mobile devices. I'm an iPhone person. I'm an Apple person. everything that I have in my common productivity apps gets shared across my devices. I'm regularly looking at them. I already extensively have used Apple Notes for years as a kind of running commonplace book catch-all. But it wasn't until I started to think about that CRM element of setting appointments for the next time to get in contact. And I realized I could just do it with recurring reminders. So I made a series of reminders. I made a list. I went through my phone book, cleared out some people that had gotten carried over from contact to contact or duplicated. And I picked out the probably 25, 30 people who are most important. And I went through and I was like, how often do I want to talk to this person? And there's people that I need to check in with every couple of days. And there's people that I need to check in with once a month. And then, I've got family members that I talk to once a week. This doesn't have to be a one size fits all. You can tailor it to the relationship. And it doesn't mean you have to wait until it comes up. If you've got a reason, you can reach out sooner. You can even mark the next time is done and have it start the clock again. But having that recurring reminder is going to surface a notification that you are going to see on a screen that you use regularly that's going to remind you, hey, it's been a while. I started keeping conversation notes, and I do this in a couple of places for things like group activities. If I have a role-playing game, I've got notes that are dedicated to that, and I'll include notes about the conversation that I have with people there. But I also make heavy use of the notes in contacts. When I go to pull up somebody's number or I tap on their picture in a text conversation, I pull up something like what you see on the right here. Little notes that I've made about what might be a good gift for them. If I'm out in an art fair and I see something that looks like a perfect fit for my friend Rosa, I want to know her ring size so that I can pick that up and I can bring it and have a little surprise for next time. I want to know what their favorite order is. We love to be seen, and making notes so that you can let the people that you care about know that you are seeing them is one of the great gifts that we can give. It also is a good opportunity to say, like, hey, we talked about doing something. We're going to talk about this next time. It's a good opportunity for that as well. In addition to those reminders, you can set, this is a little life hack. I don't know if you knew. You can set calendar appointments for literally anything. I put, obviously, friends' birthdays, families' birthdays in there. I also put my favorite artists, my favorite musicians' birthdays in my calendar. And sometimes that's just because, like, I know on Stevie Wonder's birthday, I want to listen to the album Signed, Sealed, Deliver on vinyl. It's a good excuse to listen to a great album on a given day at least once a year. But also, I have Prince's birthday in my calendar. I also listen to Prince music on that day, but it serves a double purpose because one of my friends, the first thing that we connected with, and the thing that we connected with hardest over, was our shared love of Prince's music. And so, in addition to listening to his music that day, I also know that's a great day to reach out to Jonah, right? So, you can put calendar appointments to commemorate when you took that trip together. The day that you survived having your tire go flat while you were taking a cross-country road trip. Like that harrowing in the moment experience makes for an amazing anecdote with your best friend for years and years to come. So why not set yourself a reminder and give yourself an excuse to reach out? And then for me, one of those game changers that's come up more recently is getting delayed send kind of integrated into the native messaging app. So now when I have that 3 a.m. thought, I actually have the opportunity to write it down right then and just have it send later. Pretend like I was a little bit more organized than I actually feel like I was. So, to recap, make more chances for new connections, save some time blocks for social activities, make yourself a priority. Make a promise to someone who's going to keep you honest and do it for your own good. Practice capturing the moment without living through your phone. Save not just the big moments, but the incidentals as well. And not just selfies and group pics, but the day-to-day. And engage your memory with all of the senses so that you can have stronger recall. In terms of intent, evaluate what has gotten in the way of staying connected. You might have the same challenges that I do. You might have a harder problem that you are split between your personal and your work phone, and so you don't have a single source of truth. My solutions may not be your solutions, but this process can be repeated with your own circumstances. Test different ways to account for the gaps that you have in your own process, in your own way of showing up for friends. And remember that the right way is the way that works for your brain. If it helps you accomplish the goal, even if it's unintuitive to someone else or seems like a redundant process, if that's the way that gets you to the goal, that's the right way to do it. It means you're on the right track. So thank you. I hope that this was a good walkthrough of why it's important, why it's not a nice to have or not a want to have that we get to foster and maintain those relationships in our life, but that it is necessary not only for our long-term health and ability to be there for the people that we care about, but for our ability to succeed and to excel at the things that we do at work, to help protect the organizations that we are responsible for securing, and to have a life worth living. I will go ahead and open it up now for anyone who has questions they want to send along. I'll stop sharing slides here so that I can see. And while folks are adding any questions that they have there, I will just add a reiterate for folks that may have joined late. We will be sending out those resources in the follow-up. So you are going to get that burnout assessment tool. You are going to get that kind of breakdown of process and the research as well, so that you can check that out. I did see a question, is there going to be a video of this? Yes, that is going to be coming out tomorrow. I'm going to be editing it a little bit later today and setting it up to go out tomorrow. Here's goes to another one. Would setting up several days for one to refresh with training to get better in one area? That's a great question. So I think that this is going to be really contextual. Um, I do content stuff like this in my day-to-day. If I went to a writer's retreat and did training to help get better at putting my thoughts in order and collecting the notes for research for a project, that training is going to help me to skill up and certainly is going to benefit my work life. I think that if it is to be restorative as well, there needs to be some overlap. It needs to also feed that passion that you have. You know, I love to create. I love to help build community. And so doing that multi-day training, for me, I think would be restorative. If you are someone who loves to develop and hates to document, going to a improve your documentation workshop is going to probably make you more effective at work. But I don't know if that is going to be as restorative or provide as many opportunities to make those connections and build those relationships. I hope that speaks to your question. If not, please feel free to add a little more context there. I think, how could one measure if they're experiencing burnout? Yeah, this is a really important question. I would seriously encourage you to do that self-assessment. Um, it's not a diagnosis. You can't print out that PDF and take it to your doctor and say, I need a note saying I can't work for a few weeks because I'm burnt out. But it is a good indication because your experience may be different. Mine is that it is hard to diagnose engine trouble while you're doing 80 down the highway, right? In the midst of your day-to-day, in the midst of chaos, it can often be hard to recognize how frayed we're feeling until we hit the limit. And ideally, we want to be finding that before we hit that limit. So I will say, take a look at those resources. The first link is going to be that self-assessment guide. Walk through it and talk about it with somebody. That's another part of why I think relationships are so important is relationships are knowing each other, but also relationships are knowing parts of each other that we may not always be able to see. That goes back to what I was saying about having love for yourself and seeing your own value, right? But it also means there are times where I've been asked by one of my best friends, what's wrong from the way that I said hi on a phone call. And until they asked the question, I didn't realize something was wrong. So I think that's a two-part answer. Take that self-assessment, Check in with the people who you love. How could one set up time to build relationships with team members if they are always occupied? Good question. Yeah, nobody wants to add another meeting to the schedule when there are already so many, right? Um, this is going to be a smaller version of needs assessment. Are they always occupied because everyone is having to work siloed? In that case, finding opportunities for more collaborative work that can be maybe a blend of, hey, we're all going to touch base. We are working on different product feature tickets right now in different parts of the application, but we can come together and share like what our best rubber duck bug fix was in the last couple of weeks. And somebody can share a development that they are proud of or a creative solution that they had to a problem. Um, that can, maybe we won't get the same amount of work done in that hour meeting as if we had a full hour of silo time, but conversations are going to come out of that that you aren't going to have if everybody is just reporting updates through email or doing a like 5-second update in the weekly stand up. Um, if it is duplication of meetings, don't just strike one of those meetings, make it a dedicated coffee chat. I ran into something kind of akin to this with a set of team meetings where there was a recognition that there wasn't a whole lot of in-team culture. There wasn't a lot of conversation happening in team meetings. You know, they kind of open it up and say like, who did something fun this weekend? And then stony silence. And that can be a little intimidating, you know, especially if you're close to being burnout. You may not have done a whole lot of fun stuff over the weekend. It's an easy time to stay quiet. But if you're feeling burnt out, you may be going home and playing a video game to escape, watching something to escape, reading to escape. So borrowing that in the prompt that happens in the team meeting and saying, who is watching something that they liked? Who has a good book that they're reading? That can be a way of getting that conversation going. And that can be an opportunity to Slack that person afterwards and say, hey, I was reading that too. You probably want to check out this. Even if that doesn't immediately lead to a hangout, it is making the beginning of that connection. What are some ways to improve communication with team members and other associates? If you aren't asking the question, how do you like to be communicated with? I would really encourage you to do it. I have found that it was pretty revolutionary to have a leader that told me, like, if you need an answer inside of 24 hours, that should be on team chat. If you have something that has more than 3 pieces of context, I want it in an email. If there's an emergency or there's something that you need my eyes on right away, give me a call. And that really helped me to understand how to reach out and what channel to reach out in. And also, help to avoid miscommunication or misunderstandings. If I reached out on a email and didn't hear back for a couple of days, then I know, hey, I need to send that email with the context and just send a chat saying, I need your eyes on this in the next day or so. So talking with people, having a on the table conversation about the best ways to communicate with them, encouraging people, building in your culture, encouragement to say, if you need silo time, mark that time and respect each other's silo time. But also the flip side of that is expect a reach out. If you are online, if you are listing yourself as open, expect that folks are going to reach out. Um, Finding, even if it's once a month, finding we have a standing lunch appointment literally once a month that is two of our internal teams, no agenda, no meeting items. We do like Jackbox games or we do like a doodle game. And it's ridiculous. And it is a great opportunity to see your coworkers laugh. And usually it ends up telling you a little bit of something about the rest of their life that you wouldn't have known if you only talked about your OKRs and agenda items. I love all these questions. Would writing in a journal help with keeping your thoughts somewhere else instead of your mind? Not just my answer, yes. Research says yes. How you do it that's going to be more personal. I keep a little a field notes notebook in a bag that I always have with me, and I have a little template that I've made that, if nothing else, every day I'm writing down the date, the weather, and a even if it's just like a little smiley or frowny or something face, kind of like what my memory of that day was. And if I have time to add a couple of notes of things that happened, great. And if not, um, at least I captured that. And even that level of kind of metadata about my day has helped me kind of go back and see, oh, a week before I had this absolutely no good, terrible, bad day, I started having more average and down days. And all of that started after this painful conversation with my partner. I may not have made that pattern connection working backwards if I didn't have even that kind of minimal metadata of the day. So if you can sit down and you can have that paper journal or that digital journal, that you are able to do it, fantastic. If you can't, if you struggle with it, think of ways to automate you collecting the activity that you have. I use an app called Day One that I like that alongside uh, API connection to like some different social services means that my day-to-day comments and pictures and posting that I do on social immediately gets added to my own private offline journal that I also every once in a while will go and make a manual entry in. That works well for me. What works for you may be different, but yes, finding a way that you are able to externalize your thoughts isn't just helpful for working through problems, but it's also really helpful for like processing difficult emotions and memories. So don't just keep notes to remind yourself of things for later. Also keep notes to just get the things out of your head that you need to. All right. We are coming up on the very end of our time. I want to thank you again. I love all the questions. I hope that this is helpful to you. This talk, no exaggeration, has had a fundamental change in reestablishing my relationships. And I continue to work on it because I think that it's something that is genuinely important for us as an industry to talk about. So if you find that there's other tactics that work better for you, I'd love that feedback. I'd love to continue to improve this talk and make it more generally applicable rather than sharing a process and some tips that have worked. So please share that feedback. Check out the resources that we're going to send out. And also, there is going to be a post-webinar survey. It's not required, but if you have a moment to let us know what was helpful, what you'd like to see in the future, that helps us make sure that our future content is as relevant as possible for you. And that's always our goal here. I'm Zoe Lindsey here for Blumira. I want to thank you again for joining us today. And until next time, stay safe out there. Bye bye, everybody.